Hi, this is Carrie Brownstein.
This is DJ Premier.
This is Darren Aronofsky.
You got the RZA right here.
Rose McGowan.
Radiohead.
Aisha Tyler.
Tribe Called Quest. Fred Armisen.
Fritz Paul.
Javier Munoz. Seth Meyers.
Frankie Cosmos.
Flying Lotus.
Hi, we're Chaim, and you're listening to the Talkhouse Podcast.
What's up? What is up? It's your host, Elia Einhorn. Welcome back to the Talkhouse Podcast. We have an episode that I have been very excited to share with you guys since I first heard it was coming together. Comedian Joe Pera in conversation with singer-songwriter David Bazan. To help me set up today's show, joining me from the Windy City, the birthday boy.
That's me, Josh Modell, birthday boy. Everybody's got one.
Hey, welcome to 70, man.
Thank you. It feels good to be here. I feel right about 70, so it works out.
Josh, how has this week in quarantine been for you, man?
I'm just going to say it's been okay. You know, It's got its ups and downs, but I'm making it. And I hope everybody else is too. You know what a bright spot in this week in quarantine was?
Tell me.
Listening to this episode.
I have to say it really was for me too. And also you, Josh, turned me on to Joe Pera's show. And I have been just binging not only the show, but anything I can find with him. I'm obsessed. The guy's amazing.
He's awesome. And he's the tonic that we need for these troubled times.
He's a balm.
Yes, a salve, if you will.
Josh, how exactly did this show come together, man?
This one came together in a very helpful way in that I got an email from Dave Bazan's manager who said, I'm a huge fan. Dave's a huge fan. What do you think about Dave talking to Joe Pera? And as a huge fan of both of those guys, Dave and Joe, I said, great. I had no idea, though, whether Joe Pera was a fan of Dave Bazan's or even whether or not he knew that Dave Bazan existed. So I just kind of cold sent an email to Joe Pera and said, hey, Dave Bazan's a fan of yours. We'd love to have you both on the Talkhouse Podcast. And lo and behold, he emailed me back a couple weeks later and he said, oh, I'm really sorry. I was on vacation, but I'd love to do it. So
that's a very Joe Pera thing to actually not check email for 2 weeks while on vacation.
And then to apologize when you're saying yes to something.
Totally. I love it. I love it. Well, Dave, of course, has been on the show before. We recorded a wonderful episode with he and Tom Berlin in conversation last year. But I am so glad that he has brought Joe Pera to the Talkhouse. For those of you who maybe aren't fully tapped into Joe's comedy yet, he's the host of the brilliant Joe Pera Talks With You on Adult Swim. Season 2 is out now. And on the show, he plays this grandfatherly, almost like Fred Rogers-esque middle school choir teacher in the UP, Michigan's Upper Peninsula. And the show is really sort of an appreciation with maybe a bit of self-aware send-up of wholesome Midwestern living. Would you say that's an accurate description, Josh?
Yeah, definitely. And it's this sort of very, very rare comedy, especially for our generation, that is pure and nice and also incredibly funny.
Yeah, exactly. He somehow manages to toe that line so brilliantly. Stephen Colbert really summed it up when he said about Joe's show, one of the funniest and most beautiful things I've seen in a long time. I really like that.
The show sort of sweetly examines things like the perfect breakfast crew, the magic of a trip to the grocery store, and the geology, importantly, of northern Michigan.
I am obsessed. This is, in some ways, more of a show about nothing than Seinfeld, but it leaves you feeling so good.
Definitely.
And Josh, I just have to shout out Joe Pera's Instagram, which currently features a new picture of a tomato each day.
And I'm sure he sincerely loves every tomato that he puts on there.
Yeah, there's just this beautiful sincerity to everything he touches.
Yeah, and I think the same could be said about Dave Bazan, and which I guess means this was a good pairing, right? Bazan is best known probably for his band Pedro The Lion, which he has led and been the sole creative force in for over 20 years. But he's also released music as Overseas and Headphones.
Yeah, that's with Fleet Fox's Nick Peterson.
Right, yeah. But he sort of brought Pedro the Lion back to full force in 2017. The latest Pedro the Lion album, Phoenix, came out in January of last year. If you want to see Dave during quarantine, he's been on Twitch, performing concerts, talking to people as he does so much in a live setting. And you can go to davidbazan.com and you can find past performances and when he's going to be doing it in the future.
Dave has publicly struggled with religion over the years. Pedro the Lion has at times been called a Christian band, but at other times he's publicly doubted his faith. And, I think that's a little bit of context for a few things that come up in today's conversation. I want to take a moment, Josh, to play a fantastic track from Pedro's last record, Phoenix. Let's roll Quietest Friend.
Nothing lasts forever. Now I understand. I hurt you again.
I think Joe Pera might be his new quietest friend.
Definitely. I think if you're friends with Joe Pera, he's automatically your quietest friend.
Yeah. Well, the two get into quite a bit here. One of my favorites, in a time when there is a lot of anxiety in the world, is their talk about appreciating the gentle joys of life. Gardening, lakes, wearing green hats on St. Patrick's Day.
Yeah, and they talk about how performers sometimes achieve their maximum authenticity when they're actually in front of people. They feel more themselves in front of audiences than maybe they do when they're alone.
We also get a peek into the episode Joe Pera reads you the church announcements. That one is colloquially known with fans as the Who episode. That so perfectly conveys the joy of discovering a new song that Pitchfork wrote a whole appreciative think piece when it first came out.
Yeah, if you need a place to start with the Joe Pera show, it's definitely that episode. It is incredible. And as Bazan says during the podcast, it belongs like on one of those Voyager outer space discs to announce what the human race is capable of to aliens.
We also get to hear about both Joe and David's writing techniques and how performers sometimes need to be the dom.
You wouldn't have thought BDSM came up in the Joe Pera, Dave Bazan talk, but there it is.
Let's roll it.
Yeah, let's check it out.
This is Joe Pera and Dave Bazan talking. Can I ask some basic biographical questions?
Yeah, definitely.
So you grew up in Buffalo, yeah?
Yep.
And are you in your 30s?
I
Are you in your 20s?
I like to keep it. I got a thing on my website where people are allowed to guess. So I kind of don't.
You can't. Yeah, people have things at stake here. I don't want to give anybody an advantage.
Yeah.
Do you find living in New York City, what drove you to do that? I guess comedy, that's kind of like the center of where comedy happens.
Yeah, I was doing stand-up in college, and I just realized that if I would go home and do it in Buffalo during the summer sometimes, but if I wanted to make a career out of it, which I kind of was, eager and naive enough to try and do when I graduated,
So cool.
I realized I couldn't do it in Buffalo. So I moved to New York after saving up some money. And then, so I've been doing it here ever since. And if you want to perform live stand-up comedy, it's the place where you can get up the most and get good as much as possible just because there's the most stage time. So it kind of was nice in that it made my decision easy.
Yeah.
But right now, during the quarantine, I'm kind of glad I'm not living with two roommates in a small apartment anymore.
Yeah.
I got a little patio, and we had leftover bean seeds from the show, so I actually soaked them overnight and planted some outside. So,
nice. You got a little box?
Yeah, all kinds. I planted snow-capped beans and some, I forget the name. But I don't know. We'll see what happens. It might be a little cold still, but it's all right.
It is part of the rhythm of the earth anyways. I don't know about the universe, but the rhythm of the earth that is a part of what your show kind of draws people's attention to, I feel like. And as a backdrop to season 2, with everything that goes on in there, it's really lovely, the garden thing. And so is that something that you grew up with gardening?
Yeah, my parents had a nice garden, and my grandparents had pots of stuff on their back porch. I remember my grandmother would go out and pick basil to put in dinner. my grandfather also did being teepees and arches in real life, and they never worked. But I don't know. It really is, although I sound corny, but when, in your garden, when you get your first pepper or vegetable comes up, it's really a great feeling. And we tried to do a little bit of that in the show. And I kind of wish I could be doing, like, having a garden, like, it gets kind of channeled into the show a little bit. A lot of guys I went to college with and women too became music teachers, and it's just kind of like exploring what my life would be like if I was a music teacher instead of a comedian. And it's a way to follow that kind of alternate path. So when I'm kind of stuck in New York sometimes and I fantasizing about having a garden or doing those types of activities, it kind of gets funneled into the show. And I'm kind of able to, in a weird way, live both of those at the same time.
Why the UP for the show? I see the similarities with Buffalo culturally. What things led you to make it about Marquette?
There's a lot that they have in common, like the beer, the hockey. They get a lot more snow, but there's a long winter. It started when we were making the Christmas special. We were looking for a place that's a major state that's a producer of Christmas trees and also that's likely to get snow in October.
Oh, yeah.
So the UP was the perfect spot for both of those. And then we visited, or we shot there. And then I just kept on going to Marquette and reading about it. And there's so much nature that surrounds this city right at the foot of this giant cold lake. And I thought it was a nice, kind of like the perfect place to set the show. And the main character, I thought his personality mirrored a little bit of the setting and the...
Totally.
Yeah, I don't want to sound like a cornball, but I was like looking out at Lake Superior one winter in I think it was February. I went there with Marty, the director, and I just, thought that, this is kind of got to be the spot. And I've just enjoyed going back and continuing to be there. I don't know. I like going there, and the show kind of is a way to get back there.
That's cool.
And, adult pays on Adult Swim's dime.
Yeah, totally.
And I knew a lot about it, but it was also a place where I can kind of set my imagination to fill in details in a way that I couldn't with Buffalo because I just had too much experience there.
Yeah.
I think that's important and keeping me excited and writing about it and setting the show there.
There's a book about writing poetry called The Triggering Town that is by this guy, I think is Richard Hugo, that a friend gave to me, and they talk about anything can be this, but a town is a really great magnet to collect ideas around, and it's cool that worked that way. It makes so much sense knowing that you're from Buffalo and having spent time in Buffalo on tour. And then I have pals from the UP, I guess. It's exotic. It's an exotic destination in the United States in a way. It's remote and it's beautiful and So it's I'm glad to know how that worked a little more. One of the things I like about your TV show, which I really, really deeply enjoy, is that it seems to be reminders to slow down. And there's a lot of rituals that you kind of make reference to that are simple and that you really savor, these kind of simple routines and rituals that I think it's easy for life to get moving so fast that you don't realize what an important and uplifting thing grocery shopping is, or going for a drive.
I don't know. I guess I got it from growing up in Buffalo. My family would do a lot of kind of seasonal things, and my mom would decorate the house for each holiday, like even St. Patrick's Day. And at times I thought it was kind of, a lot, and she had to take these decorations down and then store them. But I don't know. There was something about that. And like my grandfather, he would come over for St. Patrick's Day dinner, and he would have a whatever green hat he purchased that year at a garage sale and had set aside. And it's just it's kind of making your own rhythm and something to look forward to in a really simple way. And I don't know, a lot of the show is about that, having to write the show and write stand-up. It's, there's a lot of idiosyncrasies involved with writing and getting a daily routine set up. I write best when I have my phone off and I walk in the morning for 30 minutes or so.
Oh, yeah.
I think is extremely important to me is when I'm writing to do those things properly in almost kind of a nuts kind of way.
That's amazing. Do you try to have that be like a daily ritual or just whenever you're trying to write?
It's usually when I'm trying to write. I need to have some certain things in order. But I don't know. I wasn't feeling well the first few weeks of quarantine, and like I couldn't be productive. But then I kind of started to work on instituting those things again.
Yeah.
And it makes such a huge difference. I don't know. Last season I did like 10 miles in a day, but it's just kind of about creating that even tempo for your brain to think in. And
is it sort of you're making space for yourself, so you turn your phone off and go for a walk and then come back, and then it's easier to find the space to write? Am I understanding that pattern?
Sometimes. Sometimes though also my phone is really great to have on a walk, because I don't I'll pull open the notes thing and it's got the talk to text. So I'll walk for an hour and come back with notes that are all misspelled, and you got to correct everything. But it's like,
but it captures it.
I think so. And sometimes it's better than sitting down and writing with a pen and paper for me.
I'm an observer or a practitioner of the write drunk, edit sober kind of way of doing things, which is just to say there needs to be an irresponsible phase at the beginning where your editor's not allowed and that you're basically drunk or free or whatever. And I feel like walking, that to me really is a one way that I can do the write drunk part. And I don't know if do you feel free, just kind of whatever comes to your head you put down and you're not judging yourself in that phase is another way that I think of write drunk, like no judgment.
Yeah, it's fun, and I'm thinking about getting like a standing desk, but it's just so much easier when your body's moving to not edit yourself and just kind of keep on using the momentum to, generate ideas or just continue a line.
Yeah, yes, and instead of like backtracking, even with yourself, it's a good mantra, That's a great idea, Dave. What about this? And this, yeah, that's awesome. And this.
Yeah, I kind of feel like it's the closest as a comedian that I'll come to like jamming or vamping with the band, because you kind of gotta just kind of, even if you're saying "Come on, Dave" or "Come on, Joe," it's like you kind of are continuing output, and you have to say something or think of something. I don't know.
I'm always looking for things, media or books or songs or anything that I can fill my head with that helps me to remember. To slow down and that I love these quiet little rituals that aren't flashy and don't really hit my dopamine button super hard, like in the short term, but over time, the level of kind of like baseline dopamine does tend to rise. And so, yeah, I appreciate the show. It's quite, it's just, you've made, and your pals have made such a beautiful and tender thing.
No, I appreciate that it carries through. We've all been performing for a while, but, most of us have never been in a writer's room before, and I still don't have like a formula down for it, but it's just I think it's kind of we kind of go into a panic every season trying to figure it out, and but I just think what we try and do is we just care as much as possible about the show, and like we're not the smartest TV writers out there or anything, or we don't know how to do it properly, but I don't know. We just care about every little bit, and one of my co-star Joe Firestone's dad appeared in the show. He's the grocery store guy who tried in this.
Oh, rad!
Yeah, in the second season, and Connor's dad and his brothers. He plays Mike Melsky in the show. They appeared in the show, and when it started, it was my actual grandmother playing herself in the Christmas special that we made, and it's just kind of. I don't know. Yeah, we were willing to put our family into it and really, I guess, put everything that we can into it. And I hope that it carries through. But, that's the only thing that we know how to do that I think makes it a little special.
I really think so, too. And just how free you guys are, it would seem to just put in all of the little pieces that are meaningful to you. And I feel like when you don't know what you're doing, it's easier to be more sophisticated because you just wind up saying yes to so many other things because you don't know that there are guidelines that you have to push past or, whatever,
right,
or expectations. And I love that all came together for all of you guys. And I hope that you, even though now it's out and you have experience bringing it to market, and it seems like you guys would have a shot at just staying in the zone, that you worked in the first couple times and not. It's hard to do that. I feel like it's hard to stay sort of soft and to stay unaware, which I think is good to be unaware.
Yeah, it made me think of like how in the first season we wanted to shoot it during the winter and do a lot of scenes with snow on the ground and also at nighttime because that combination is just in my imagination is the best thing. But then when we'd have to do an overnight and then go shoot outside in the Milwaukee and Michigan winter, it makes me wonder how much more of that I'll write. But I hope I hope I don't think about it too much because. I don't know, but it's not knowing that put me and the whole crew out in the snow at midnight, and I don't know. I feel bad now. I can't. At least now, I guess. Right. If I do it again, I can't pretend that I didn't know better to the crew. They'll definitely know.
Well, yeah, that can be baked into the pitch. Like, okay, guys, so. That is a tricky kind of intersection where the more that you do something, you do get better at the craft of it because to work efficiently or to use your resources well, it really does require one to get better at the use and the allocation of those resources. And with that can come awarenesses that would limit your creativity too, along with that. And to get more and more savvy about one's craft and to get less and less savvy about how it's landing in the world is kind of a tough trick to pull off, but one that I just look back on my own work and the very first record that I made before I had ever really put something out in the world. Is so much more sophisticated than anything I've been able to do since then, because after that I was aware of how mean everybody was and how scrutinized everything was going to be. And there was a kind of rhino skin that got put on me against my will just from knowing, just like the tree of knowledge of good and evil kind of deal. Like it just from stepping into the market, I began to understand what was waiting for me at the end of each creative process, and it changed me, and I spend a lot of time now realizing I want to go back to that place where I just really don't care what happens when it goes to market.
Yeah, I was reading about some of your albums and your new album, and I was like, holy crap, it's nice that people write about music in the depth that they do. I don't think they do it with comedy, but I was like,
Right.
I can't. I mean, especially since your music is so personal, it's almost like you're being psychoanalyzed in every single music review. It's that's a lot.
When I watch your guys' show, I don't know. There's so much vulnerability in it. I mean, just even in the character, which I guess I'm kind of curious about. When did your kind of character develop, and how? I mean, it seems like it flows directly from just who you are. I've heard Chappelle say that, like, the only time that he's himself is when he's on stage, and the rest of his life is just the bullshit that he has to do to have a space to be himself. And I wonder if the stand-up and comedy was like permission to be yourself in a way that was hard to pull off before, or...
It's tough. I kind of agree with Chappelle. I don't know. There's no other feeling than being on stage, and I try and perform that way in the show, but it's hard to get in that same kind of zone. I don't know. Would you agree with that for him as a performer?
With Chappelle?
Yeah.
It made me realize something about myself, I guess, and so there are controversies with the recent specials, and I understand what that is, but sure. I do think that it kind of even makes it more clear that that's a space where he is used to being free and being himself, and he's so gifted at delivering comedy. He can take any story, anything, and present it in a way that's very compelling and funny.
Right.
And so I do recognize a freedom. And if maybe what he's saying is that's one of the few places that he has earned the right to be himself, and it just so happens that it's in that setting where you're getting this very electric feedback from people. Yeah, that I feel that. There's this Gary Shandling, Tom Petty video on YouTube where the two of them are hanging out for like 20 minutes. Yeah, it's so good. They're talking for a while and kind of getting past the early stages of like getting settled in the conversation and moving from the driveway into the studio of Tom's like home studio.
Yeah. And
then there's a beat and Gary says, you know, I really feel good. And do you feel good? Kind of like to Tom. Tom's like, yeah. And he's like, yeah, I really feel good. And Tom says, it only takes 3 cameras you know, for us to feel good. When I've seen a whale in the wild, I started sobbing because there's just a freedom. They just do whatever. They're just doing their thing. And it seems like that there's some temperaments who the only way to find that is to be on stage. And there's a sense in which people who find themselves in that spot, I kind of am realizing that that's how I work, and it's kind of shameful feeling because I don't want to be that way, but at the same time, it seems true, and I can see it in a Chappelle kind of character, and in a lot of ways, I think that for me, I was needing to process so much grief in my life for various reasons that music was the only place that I was allowed to do that because there was a tradition of sad songs. Mm-hmm. And so within that tradition, I had permission to express the grief that I was trying to process. And so for me, yeah, the place where I'm most truly myself is in song, and the place where I get the biggest affirmation of that and the biggest high that is available to me in life is on stage. Totally. And that's an earned high that is really unique. You know, not everybody can have that, and when you do want it again. It's quite intoxicating.
Yeah, that all feels really familiar. I definitely agree with the shame of that. I don't know. It's something I'm kind of trying to balance out too, because just the idea of being a comedian for a living is a little bit... I don't know. I come from a a family where people work really hard, and it's not, just the idea of being able to make a living doing it is a little nuts. But
it feels immodest somehow to be a star, a relative star for your job, or
Yeah, I'm trying to get rid of that shame. When I do like an hour-long set, sometimes like the first 30 minutes will be doing material, and then I'll do some crowd work, and if it's going well, I can expand it and keep talking with the audience and extending the show. And it's same kind of like when you get a writing wave where the first 30 minutes are painful, or you're thinking about it, but then once it kind of comes, and it's so much easier, I think, on stage to get that free flow between what you want to get out. I don't know, when it feels like you get that more direct connection from your head to your mouth and then to the audience, and maybe it's just being present completely in a way that I have difficulty other times, but when you get that,
totally.
I don't know. That's why I feel like maybe the shame isn't the worst thing, because I guess if it's you being your most direct self and opening up in that way and kind of getting that flow going, I think that's a good thing, is being able to share that.
I totally agree.
It took a number of years of doing stand-up to experience that, not just telling jokes, but then kind of going off, connecting with the audience, and then finding like a new thing with them. That was when I learned like how far you have to go to master the art form, and like how I'm still like so early on in this whole thing. And like Dave Chappelle, he'll do sets that are hours long, which is kind of ridiculous. But once he can hit that stride, it's like
he has everybody.
That's what the form is about, and it's very cool.
It reminds me of an experience I had playing a show in San Francisco. I do a Q&A in the middle just to basically do some crowd work, even though it's not a comedy show. Just try to get people involved and get their hands on the wheel of the energy just a little bit. And part of that is I've felt that shame in a way that has required I need permission from people to do things. Even if I'm on stage and they've paid money to come see me perform, I still feel like if I get on a roll that I'm being overindulgent and somehow I'll miss a cue, that I'm going too far. And so I had this way of constantly, the Q&A came from just needing to be able to have my finger on the pulse when I was doing banter, so that I just wasn't a jack off up there. At the San Francisco show, I was doing a Q&A, and this is, a decade and a half into doing that thing, and I had said something that was true but a little harsh, and I kind of backtracked a little bit, and a woman's voice came out of the audience. In this case, it's a dark rock club,
Yeah.
And she said, "You're the Dom." And I said, "Wait, can you say that again?" And she said, "You're the Dom." And I understood, like, oh, it's my responsibility. Like there's power, there's a vacuum of power at the center of this thing that if I don't fill it all the way, people are in danger of at least having a bad time, or in danger of whatever energy might come from some other dickhead in the audience taking control of that energy.
Yes.
It was permission. It was like, this is a trust relationship, and for everybody to be happy and safe, you have to occupy that Dom position all the way. And because you care about us and our experience, not because you need to be in charge, but because you're a custodian of the energy.
Yes.
And that helped me a lot to begin the journey to, I tried to own the time on stage as much as I could, given the permission issues that I had. But just recently, through that woman yelling that at the show, it began a process of me undoing that shame and really being a better performer because I would take more responsibility with less shame. The responsible Dom, you know.
Yeah. You got to be the Dom DeLuise of the show.
The Dom DeLuise. You're the DeLuise. I watched your Buffalo Bills joke and then tried to find as much other stand-up on YouTube as I could. I had seen both seasons of the show, but I hadn't gone deeper and listened to podcasts or stand-up. And I noticed in the stand-up there was some... I grew up loving Bob Newhart. My parents watched the Bob Newhart show, and then we watched Newhart, and then found bits of Bob Newhart stand-up. And there's a similar kind of cadence and something that reminded me of Bob Newhart in yours and other comics like him. Is that anything that you spent time with, or who were the people that really turned you on?
Yeah. That's really nice of you to say. Most of the audiences I perform for don't notice a connection with Bob Newhart, but sometimes like a little bit older audience will say that, and I really appreciate it. I used to have a joke about feeling guilty about not being back in Buffalo because that's how the Breakfast Crew bit started. My dad has a friend who has a breakfast crew, and he's really jealous about it. So I said, and I the best breakfast crew is your full-grown sons, but I'm denying him that because I'm here in New York trying to be Bob Newhart for a new generation. But
I love it. Yeah. Was there a nod? There's a similar energy to the Mr. Rogers show as well, I feel. Is that something that came up for you guys?
Definitely. I think anytime you have kind of a direct-to-camera in somebody's home, it's there. And when I did the early animation, Joe Pera Talks You to Sleep, it was definitely there. But it's one of the things that we thought about at the beginning, but it's been different stuff lately, and I think we have less in common with definitely just kind of the gentle tone, and like when he would cut to, he went to see a saxophone be made one time. Maybe I'm confusing it with Sesame Street, but there's definitely ties like that, but I don't want to be offering Fred Rogers type guidance because I'm definitely not that. Christopher Guest was kind of like a guidepost for me, and like something that kind of really changed my mind about comedy. And
Christopher Guest's movies, the mostly improv movies that he's made, or other aspects. Yeah,
those
Guffman and the Best in Show, and
so it's kind of the form, but also the way he can just walk into a scene and be so funny, and I don't know. It's just like him, or there's a lot of people I like. I think Zach Galifianakis' Comedy Central presents when he did the ballet at the end of the special. But like him, I don't know, like the guy like Zach Galifianakis or Christopher Guest, when they can just walk in and be so funny in anything and just have anything that they say be funny is such an impressive thing. I think it's kind of like that.
Yeah.
Just like the funny kind of flows through them in a way that, just every movement and expression, and it's just so dense. And those two guys were people I really looked up to.
I think that does come through in the show. In the Jesse Thorne interview that I listened to, you were talking about keeping awkward little beats and like body movements or things in the show, or like when maybe what you're referencing is when Joe Firestone ran into the door. And those are just, as a watcher of filmed narrative stuff, those are my favorite things. Kind of what it reminds me of is in The Big Lebowski, whenever the cowboy guy, I'm blanking on his name, but he's talking to the dude and he leaves, and he starts to go to the right, and then it's like he got the wrong direction, and then he went to the left instead, and it's a major motion picture that costs a lot of money per minute of film.
Yeah.
And there's just things where you're looking for an indication that they did this on purpose, or at least, I don't know. Those are so delightful, and there's so many layers on which that's happening throughout the show. Just even in the script, where you throw in Kaiser Sose in the line of questions, and it's random, but it's not random for somehow the people viewing. It's just everybody's tracking, and it's such a pleasure to follow along. And I guess I'm curious, is everybody must be on the same page there, that everybody's just lovingly trying to put, because you guys are all writing and all working on.
Yeah.
That's the thing I can't get over, is the show's voice is so consistent with so many different people writing episodes is wonderful.
Yeah. Well, there's do a rewrite at the end to kind of even everything out, and then in edit we make sure the tone is right. But I don't know. I'd say that the Kaiser Soze is intentional. We just, in our own subtle way, we try and figure out a moment where we can pull a big joke or a goof in there. I just know that I'm not the most coordinated, and I know we all know kind of what each other can do physically. Mm-hmm. So I know that Joe Firestone is only a little over 5 feet. So I had a scene in mind where she gets in and out of a giant truck, and I had that.
That's right.
Yeah, and I just had that idea of that in my head since before we even got into the writing room, and I just want to see her get in and out of a big truck over and over again. Yeah. And maybe a little, as we did more takes, she kind of was goofier on purpose. Mm-hmm. She was very sincere at first about how she was trying to step in and out of a giant truck, and that's the best thing to me. I was kind of mean to make my friend do that, but she wasn't upset with me about that.
No, it's I think that what I'm hearing you say is you're saying your body moves in a certain way, and you are willing to use what in the past you might have. I'm projecting here, and you can tell me if I'm wrong, but in the past, as a person in high school, you might have tried to move less that way, but now it's there's a space in which it benefits the whole thing for me to just be myself in a warts and all way that is, it's not an exploitation of those things, but it's an acceptance of those things, because you can see their value in this context.
Yeah, a lot of it is on set. I'm not clever enough to write everything, but on set we've got a really good prop guy named Bob, and when I say have to carry a big cooler, it was in one scene, it was kind of half filled with water, and he said, "Let me empty it out for you." And we decided though to just keep it full and as heavy as possible, because it's funnier. Or if carrying too much stuff or more stuff than I can balance is funny, and if I drop it in the take, it happens, but we don't plan on it. But just, I don't know, giving somebody too much stuff to carry, or just a cup of water that's a little bit too full, I don't know.
It's a tension. You're keeping tension all the time. It's so great.
Right. Yeah. So other shows might be why don't we trim those pants so that they fit, or that they don't make a noise when you walk, or that's a bad example, but stuff like that. We'll just say, oh, thanks.
I was about to say that's a great example, because it's those things where you're walking down a hallway in a hotel and your pants are going wink, 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 like your 8th grade, English teacher's pantyhose you did, and you remembered that. And there are these little, I don't know what the percentage is, but a percentage of people, and I'm in that percentage, when I hear my shoe squeak because my heel's rubbing in it, I feel embarrassed about it. And I want to make it stop. And it's lovely to sort of celebrate all those things and to have that be a kind of consistent texture of a TV show is great. The stage that you set with the tone of everything just leaves so much room for subtle tenderness just throughout, and the joy that is found like in the Who episode it's such a bolt, you know. It's I had a question about that too. In the show, it sort of implies being kind of sheltered somehow. Is that something that but because you hadn't heard that song?
Yeah.
That resonates with me because I grew up religious in a way that I wasn't allowed to listen to what they called secular music. And so I didn't hear Baba O'Reilly till I had put out a record.
What?
You know? Yeah, until I was like 20. The first time I picture hearing it was in my booking agent's apartment in Ann Arbor, Michigan in like 1999 when I was 22.
Holy cow. So you put out a whole record and you hadn't even listened to Who's Next yet?
Yeah, no, I hadn't heard. So on a tour in 2000, me and that same person, my friend Trey, were driving back from, I can't remember what we were driving cross country for, but we were listening to classic rock radio, and
yeah,
I said, "Who's this?" And he was like, "Wait, you don't know who this is?" And I was like, "No, I'm asking who is this?" And he was like, "It's Van Halen." And I just was like, "That's cool. I've never heard that song before." You know, I've been in a rock band for a long time, but just you're kind of subject to either what's around when you're growing up, and I wasn't allowed to listen to the radio or anything like that. And then once I was 14 or 15, and it was just punk rock people that I was around. And so I heard Fugazi and was like deeply into, just whatever I found there. And, I had the radio in my town, the alternative radio played Nirvana and The Cure and, U2 and Depeche Mode and stuff. So I got on the train and absorbed everything I could. But yeah, so then me and that guy, I just said, "Hey, could you tell me, let's just listen to classic rock all the way home. And you just talk to me, you just tell me the history of the songs that I'm hearing." Because he knew everything.
That's so funny. Wow.
Yeah. So I relate to that aspect of the character. Also, just the calling, the various radio stations, and the hilarious disbelief in the DJ, and the way that he handles that, and the way that that's sort of blocked is just so funny.
Oh,
he just doesn't even really fully believe it till the end. That he's like, "Oh, I guess he just doesn't." Okay, cool. Never heard it.
Yeah, I appreciate it, but wow.
So where did that come from?
I mean, I was going to say when you first brought it up, I hope that was, not too far-fetched, that he hadn't heard the song, because it's, kind of, it's a little bit everywhere, but that's amazing that you hadn't heard it. So it's not far-fetched at all. But I gotta ask, in between your first and second album, did you find that you wanted to put like a Van Halen influence or another? Hearing that stuff, did it change? What did it change between the two albums? Or were you even tempted to kind of like, let's try out this Van Halen sound this next time around?
I didn't particularly like Van Halen when I heard it.
Yeah.
Van Halen's grown on me. When I was a kid, I didn't like the flashiness in music. I don't love it, and part of it is because growing up in certain Christian cultural circles, there was just a kind of like fakeness to things, and I was really searching for things that didn't have that bravado or whatever.
Yeah.
And more recently, I've come around to Van Halen as something that I enjoy listening to. And also for me, the instrument that I was using to be a musician with, not like the musical instrument, but like me as a I was so limited. I couldn't sound like anybody. I couldn't copy anybody because I just barely had the simple relationship with the tools that I had. It was really expressive. Before the rhino skin kind of started to get put on layer by layer. But so it was a time when it didn't even occur to me to try to copy people because I just couldn't effectively do it.
You didn't have the pedals Van Halen did.
I didn't. I was missing the piece of gear that was needed. The longer that I've been doing this, the more I just get an expanded tool set all the time. But I forget where that started.
Well, I asked you if how the listening to classic rock changed. Or may have influenced. Bob. I guess that's really thought of the idea is Dan Licata and I were driving around and the song came on and the start of Bob O'Reilly and the whole song. It's no matter how many times I've listened to it or I've heard it at the store in a warehouse. I worked for a bricklayer for a summer, and like they had classic rock and a radio on the whole time, and you hear the same cycle of songs every couple of days, and it's almost like the fact that song can still come on and have kind of catch you. And I think if it was released today, it would still be a very extremely popular song. So it's just kind of playing on that and the network, because it was we were trying to get the rights to the Who. They were like, is there any other song that'll work? And we tried a couple, but nothing is quite the same as the way that song starts and the instruments and
it's so believable when the twinkling of the synthesizer comes in and then you're reaching down to the dishwasher and your hand pauses, dripping wet hand pauses. Like it really is believable that song would catch you, would catch a person like that. Just like, wait, what?
Yeah.
And just it really is. My manager and I my manager introduced me to your show. He was like, how did they pay for that? Like, that's just got to be. He was like, somebody really is supportive of that show, where whoever's ever putting it out, because. So you don't have to say how much, but that was a major issue, I assume.
I thought it was going to be much worse. Like I thought, because I remember my only context for how much stuff cost was, remember Conan O'Brien in his last week of shows, he had like the Bugatti Veyron with Rolling Stones track as a theme song as like a new mascot, and it was like this bit cost $1 million. So I didn't know, and it was much more reasonable than you'd think for that side of the song.
Yeah,
but we licensed the song. They agreed to license it for us. But then I hope it's all right I share this. But whoever licensed it must have there was a miscommunication. They thought we were going to use it like 4 or 5 times for a song. So we were into like the first round of edit, and in the episode they charge you from when a song starts and stops. Like if you dim the volume and then bring it back up, that's like you can't chop up a song and count it as like one use. Every time there's like a 10-second start and stop, you get charged for it. Which is, I mean, great for musicians. But
totally.
Like we ended up using 13 chunks of it in the episode. So we turned it in. And we thought, we were very proud of how it came out. And then the producer came back and was like, we licensed this for 4 or 5 times. We're going to have to seriously redo the edit. It was like, oh no, I was very scared. But luckily the head of the network saw the show, loved it so much that they went and paid for it to be used the additional time. So
that is so great.
Yeah, because of him, we were able to. The network, they kind of doubled down on the episode, literally, and it was such a relief because I don't know what happened.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad that your edit that you guys made was the one that got to happen. Is it the Voyager that has that gold record on it that is for aliens or whatever? Like that episode of TV goes in that time capsule for me because it says something about rock and roll, which I love, and it says something about church, which I am familiar with, and I guess I can say I love in all its complexity.
Yeah.
And but it just says something about joy, and it's such a powerful episode of TV. It's unbelievable.
Thanks. Yeah.
Well, I thank you so much for doing this, Joe. And
Yeah. Should we stop recording?
Oh, sure. Yeah. Bye, everybody.
Bye. Thanks. Bye.
Dave Bazan, Joe Pera, thank you so much for joining us here on the Talkhouse Podcast. Listeners, if you enjoyed today's episode, definitely make sure to check out Dave's last appearance on the podcast. That was a conversation with Tom Berlin.
Yeah, Dave's written for the site as well. He wrote about Sun Kill Moon's Benji and Bill Callahan's Dream River a while back.
Josh, we have had a spate of great episodes recently that feature a comedian in conversation with a musician. I'm thinking Wyatt Cenac with The Roots' Black Thought and Waxahachie with Whitmer Thomas just in the last month. Listeners, definitely check those out.
Both great episodes.
You can find us at Talkhouse across socials. If you want to send gripes or show ideas, you can hit me at Elia Einhorn on Twitter.
Thanks so much to Joe and Dave for recording themselves so well during quarantine. I also recorded myself, as did Elia.
This is the new norm. Big love to our producer, Mark Yoshizumi, who makes it all possible. The Talkhouse Podcast theme song was composed and performed by The Range. Till next week, I'm Elia Einhorn.
I'm Josh Modell.
Peace. And the geology of Northern Michigan.